Johnny Reid and Associates has created a 5-hour video training program entitled The Reid Technique of Investigative Interviewing and Positive Persuasion. The video training program is designed for anyone who conducts investigative interviews: law enforcement, corporate security / loss prevention, human resources, credit card and insurance fraud investigators, regulatory investigators in both federal and state agencies, and many more. The program consists of 3 primary topics. The first is what we call behavior symptom analysis, in which we discuss the verbal and nonverbal behavioral characteristics we can watch for and listen for during an interview that will help us to identify someone who's being truthful and honest versus the individual who may be withholding or fabricating relevant information. The second topic is what we call the behavior analysis interview. This gets into the structure of the investigative interview, the kinds of questions we want to ask to develop both factual and behavioral information, which will serve as the basis for determining investigative direction. And the third part will be positive persuasion. When we have identified the person who appears to have committed the act that's under investigation, how do we persuade them to tell the truth about what they've done? The program includes a 31-page study guide that is designed for note-taking during the presentation. Let me show you a 6.5-minute clip from the video training program that will give you some idea as to how the material is presented and how we use the study guide. This program will be presented in 3 parts. The first part will be introduction and behavior symptom analysis. The second part would be the behavior analysis interview, and part 3 will be positive persuasion. So part 1, the introduction to behavior symptom analysis. We're going to talk about the characteristics of the interview process so that we're all thinking the same thing as we refer to interviews today in our program. Interviewing, from our perspective, is always a non-accusatory, non-confrontational, information-gathering conversation. You and I, as investigators in the interview process, should be neutral, objective, non-judgmental fact finders. There should be no accusations of guilt in the interview process. We're there to learn what the subject's story is, what do they say happened, what did they see they witnessed, etc. Interviewing is typically a Q&A process. And as you see on the screen and in your workbook, we follow what's called the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule is where the investigator does 20% of the talking, the subject does 80%. So we want to be asking those open-ended questions. Can you tell me what happened? What happened after that? Then what did you do? And let them fill in the information, even though we may know it from having talked to 3 other people who are there in this particular event. Let's see what the subject tells us, or in some cases, more importantly, what they don't tell us. Now, when you see yellow text on the screen, yellow text is fill-in information for your workbook. For example, you've got 3 empty bullets there under letter C. Here's the first fill-in. There are 2 kinds of questions we use in our interviews: investigative and behavior provoking. Investigative are the questions that are relevant to the investigation in terms of who, what, when, where, why type of questions. What's the subject relationship to the victim? What were their activities during the time period in question? Do they have an alibi, etc. Behavior-provoking questions are questions that we've been using in some cases for many decades, which we have seen over the years most truthful people tend to answer one way, most deceptive would tend to answer a different way. And so let me give you a very simple and clear-cut example. Someone has killed your next-door neighbor, and the police are interviewing all of the immediate neighbors as part of the investigation, and they come and interview you. And during the course of the interview, they say to you, John or Mary, if we find the persons who did this to your next door neighbor, what do you think should happen to them for doing that? And we would say, prosecuted, spend the rest of their life in jail. The guy should be behind bars. We want the bad guy to pay. Okay, some of you are thinking it depends on which neighbor. We want the bad guy to pay. But if I'm the guy who killed my next door neighbor, and you ask me in the interview, what do I think should happen to the person who did this? You don't know it, but you're asking me what should happen to me. And so most bad guys don't hang themselves. Gee, that's hard to say. I mean, I suppose it depends on the circumstances. I mean, if you talk to the other neighbors, you've heard this guy's a real jerk, right? They give a different kind of answer. We're going to share with you 9 of these behavior-provoking questions
you can interweave into your interview process. And oftentimes, the answers to those questions from the subject will give you great insight into their potential involvement in the issue under investigation. We take notes in our interviews, even if it's being recorded, because not only is taking notes used to document what the person's telling us, which of course we have on the recording, but we use the note-taking process as an excuse to create silences. You want dead silences in your interviews, because here's what's going to happen. We ask the subject a question, he gives us an answer, we're jotting it down, and then we stall for a few seconds, write down an observation, write down our next question. Sometimes in that silence, the person who may have just lied to us is thinking to themselves, should I say something else? Wasn't that good? Wasn't that enough? And sometimes they'll add to the first answer. And almost every time they add to the first answer, they're saying something that they probably didn't mean to say. When we show you some of our videos on interviews, you're going to hear dead silences. And you're going to wonder, what's the investigator waiting for? Well, we're stalling a little bit to see if the subject adds to that first answer. Note-taking can give us that excuse to be busy and not ask something right away. A very critical principle to interviewing is do not tell the subject what you know, but rather ask them what they did, what happened, what they saw, and see if what they tell you is consistent with what you know. As an example, John works in real estate. He had a real estate office in his home, and he had a couple of colleagues who also worked out of that real estate office, preparing contracts, sales calls, things of that nature. One Saturday evening, John is found dead, shot in the head in his basement. And as part of the investigation, we're interviewing all of John's co-workers. And we ask one of them, who we'll call Dennis, Dennis, when was the last time you were over to John's house, whether it be on a social occasion or to work out of the real estate office? And he says, oh gosh, it's been at least a month, maybe 5 or 6 weeks. Okay. Unbeknownst to Dennis, the police had canvassed the neighborhood after the murder, and they found a neighbor lady who lived catty-corner from John, and she was out in her front yard Saturday morning about 10 a.m. filming her kids playing soccer in the yard. And in the background, you could see someone going up to John's front door. And as you take a closer look at the film, it turns out that it was Dennis, who at 10 a.m. on the day of the murder went into John's home. Dennis just told us he hadn't been there for 4 weeks, maybe even 5 or 6. So the fact that he lied about that was very, very critical to the investigation. If we had done the interview differently, and we had said to Dennis in the interview, Dennis, one of the things the police did was canvass the neighborhood. They found a lady who lives across from John filming her kids playing soccer that Saturday morning. They were out in the front yard. In the background, we see you going up to John's house at about 10 a.m. What was your reason for visiting him that day? Well, if he knows we have him on film going up to the front door, he's not going to lie about it. And he could probably very readily make up an excuse about having to fill a contract out or something like that. So let's not tell people what we know.
The program cost is $149. Once you purchase the program, you have unlimited access to it for a period of 14 days, so you can watch it as often as you like. The program is designed, however, for individual use. If an organization purchases 10 or more programs, the cost factor is reduced to $99 per program. We offer a 25-question test that you can take to earn 5 continuing professional education credits and a certificate of course completion. For additional information or to purchase the program, visit our website at reid.com.